wall of power will fall.
Welcome to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Paul Metsa. We've got a great show tonight. Minnesota's favorite son, Bob Dylan, played an amazing show on Monday, July 6th at the brand spanking new Mystic Lake Amphitheater in Shakopee, Minnesota. I was there and totally enjoyed it. And my three guests tonight were also there, and we are going to chat with them about Bob Dylan and that show in particular. First up is musician Robbie Vee, whose father, Robbie Vee, gave Bobby Dylan, then Bobby Zimmerman, one of his first gigs with his band, The Shadows, up there in Fargo, North Dakota. Back then, the young Robert Zimmerman was going by the stage name Elston Gunn. So we're going to hear Robbie and stories about that, about his dad and what he thought of the Dylan show. Then next up, we've got a wonderful woman named Colleen Sheehy. She's a retired leader and organizer of the symposium and book Highway 61 Revisited, Bob Dylan's Road from Minnesota to the World. And she coordinated and helped curate the Wiseman Art Museum Bob Dylan American Journey in 2007. And last but not least, longtime journalist and writer Martin Keller will chime in on his views of the Bob Dylan show. Marty's been writing about music starting with Sweet Potato in the Twin Cities way back in the 1970s. Wrote for City Pages for years, wrote a great book called Space Club, and has a new book coming out called The Complete Individualist about Bob Dylan and his life with Bob Dylan. He also tells us about a great 4-hour interview that he did with Bob in the 80s in a hotel room. So it's going to be a great show talking about Bobby Dylan. And now we start with the great Robbie Vee. You've seen Dylan many times over the years. In fact, you were, I remember a show at Midway Stadium, I believe in 2013. Bob rarely speaks, but I was with my girlfriend at the time, and he started to go in this really long introduction for one of his songs. And I told everybody around me, pipe down, let's hear what he's saying. And he gave the most incredible introduction to your father, who was there that night. And then he performed the song Susie Baby. It must have been an incredible moment for you both.
It was. I had brought my dad there for his 70th birthday, and I had gotten off tour the night before, and my mom called me and said, are you going to bring your dad to that Dylan concert you said you were going to take him to? I didn't have tickets. The thing was sold out. And so I had put a couple calls in, and I got a call back from his office, and he just laid out the red carpet. Next thing you know, we were backstage. I watched that show with my dad on a chair next to the monitor board of Bob's piano. And so it was just like they couldn't have treated him any nicer. And it was amazing. Then they had some time to chat after the show, and it was interesting to just listen to their reminiscing the years and their childhood. And it was just a very potent conversation,
Oh, now tell us about Robbie. This is from the horse's son's mouth, but tell us what your dad used to tell me about when Bob Dylan showed up, and where it was, and how Bob talked his way onto the gig with your dad.
So my dad's brother was in a record store in Fargo, and Dylan walked up to him, and they introduced themselves, and Bob said that he just got off the road with Conway Twitty, and he lied, of course. And so they hired him on the spot, brought him on the road for a handful of shows, and Marty Keller, I did this interview for his book. Marty laid out that whole scenario, the dates and where they were. I gave him all that stuff. And so he was on the road with them, and they'd end up in venues where they'd have a piano that was out of tune, and they didn't carry their own piano. And so Bob was really great in the key of C kind of thing. Really wasn't totally up to snuff at that point as a piano player. But
sure.
But they liked him, and my dad liked him a lot, and they were friendly to each other, and they became friends. And I think ultimately it was mutual. They kind of let him go. The money wasn't there to hire another guy necessarily, and they didn't have the piano, and they just kind of ran into issues. But when the piano wasn't right, Bob would go up and start doing hand claps next to my dad. kind of like the Blue Caps from Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps.
Right. Now, was Bob going by the stage name Elston Gunn back then?
He was with 3 N's. Elston Gunn with 3 N's. So he was very mysterious even then.
Oh, man. So that is such a wonderful story. And I've heard a lot of the Dylan stories, but I've never heard bumping into your dad's brother at the record store. You only hear these kinds of things on Stars Over the Prairie. So, Robbie, thanks for sharing that. You were at the show with our mutual friend Jim Steinfeld, and you had some time to spend with Bob's Dylan's longtime bass player, Tony Garnier. Tell us about that, and how were you able to hook up with Tony?
Well, that was for Jimmy Steinfeld, my friend, who we have put out a song together, Johnny Red Shotgun, last month, and we've been promoting it. Jimmy Steinfeld's the great rock and roll photographer. He's incredible career. And so it was kind of a last minute idea to go to the show. I said, "Hey, Jimmy, you want to go?" And he said, "Let's go." And we ended up just checking in with Tony to see if he was up to saying hi, and he was. So we hung out with him. I had hung out, with Bob backstage and that kind of stuff, and he always kind of had his band a little bit separate. It's like the band would walk by from about 20 feet and wave. It's that kind of thing. So I'd never met Tony, and but I'd been, backstage with him before, and
sure.
Out of the last 37 years. And so it was just fun to kind of compare notes and sitting behind the monitor board for that show that you had mentioned in 2013 or whatever that was.
Yeah.
I had an idea about how they approached their music and how Bob liked his band to play. And I just got a whole concept, because to me it was so powerful being on stage. The motifs and the cadences and the way they locked in this like glue to each other, and just kind of went down the road like a big jalopy, like a rock in '88, like a wave together. It was just fascinating to feel that on stage. And so I wanted to ask Tony about that. Like, what is the deal with the approach? Because it's just unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I've been on stages with a lot of people, as a backup artist or as a focus artist,
Right.
So I'd never really, I just didn't experience that before. And he was really just a nice guy, and he explained it to me that, Bob, it's all about the song. He likes the song. He likes the players to it's not about a noodly guitar thing. He likes them to lock in and do the song,
right.
and then kind of follow him by listening. That was the main thing he emphasized, like a jazz gig,
Sure.
Because I said, "What, you got some jazz guys? Where's the rock and roll guy?" And he's like, "Well, the jazz guys really know how to listen, so they Bob can do whatever he wants. They become like an extension or something in the toolbox.
Right.
Bob can feel free to create in the moment, and these guys are just hanging on every note and jumping on it." And that's what I experienced in 2013, but a band that was really well oiled and had been with him for a long time and had really had the dynamic range of doing it often. And but I think this was the first show that those two guitar players were on stage together,
right?
Julian and Joel, right?
Yeah. Well, and it was, I had seen several shows. Probably one of the greatest Dylan shows I ever saw was in 2019. My friend Cam Strang got us some tickets. We were in the fourth row at the Beacon Theater. And seeing Dylan in New York, it's its own thing, because they really claim him as their son, as well they should, because that's really where Zimmerman became Bob Dylan in a true artistic way. But I was amazed, and I'm a guitar player myself, as you are, Robbie, at just how amazing Larry Campbell and Charlie Sexton played together. And what's kind of frustrating, Robbie, and you might agree with me, when you go see those shows, and he's got two of the greatest electric guitar and acoustic guitar players in America, and Bob's taken most of the solos, And then when he finally lets the guitar players fly, man, it takes it to a whole different level. But I thought Julian, I believe his name is Lage, and Joel Patterson, first time together that night had that same sort of symmetry and mojo that Larry and Charlie had, which I think was exciting for a lot of us longtime Dylan fans. But tell us about what you thought of that show now compared to what you saw in 2013, what you saw just on July 6th, 2026.
Well, I thought the first thing that caught me was that I thought he was in great voice. I heard some questionable reviews, and everybody's got an opinion about something. But so I kind of wanted to see it for myself, like what's the issue with these reviews. And I was actually blown away with the show, and I disagreed with every review that somebody told me. I just thought he was in great voice, and he was in his process, which means that he was showing up and he was real and he was in the moment, and all those things you look for in an artist. My dad went to see Elvis Presley in the '70s and said he sounded great, but he kind of phoned it in. He just wasn't. He wasn't in the moment. It's like there's something really incredible about people that show up. And they're in their process. And he was doing that. His phrasing with his vocals. He's a great phrasing singer. Nobody gives him enough credit for that. I think with the Sinatra records, you got a hint of that. But, not just Sinatra, but even melodically, like Miles Davis. He understands phrasing in music better than any artist. You could put him up with any great artist that is a jazz guy or, like a jazz singer. And he just understands phrasing. And I really got a sense of that night. Like, that was my takeaway. Like, his vocals were just very, he had so much respect towards the phrasing. And I love the guitar players, the way they kind of played around him, Joel and Julian. I am a big the Sexton fan, though. I like that duo a lot. And what I liked about it was they're rock and roll guitar players. So yeah. They had natural restraint because they're Link Ray kind of guys. The one note says it all, and it's the way they say that one note. And that's how Bob Dylan is. It's the one note says it all. So I like that combination. The jazz guys, I thought they were great, but it's a different kind of great, and I like that too because it's good to see new things and hear new things and go, oh, now we're doing this. You don't have to have the same thing all the time. But for two jazz guys, I never seen so much restraint in my life. They were just pulling like horses rushing to the barn, pulling it back to kind of. Because that's how Bob likes it. It's about the song.
Well, I always referred to when with Charlie Sexton, I called it the Charlie Chop. He was really, keeping that downbeat going, and I thought Julian did a great job. I'm going, oh, the chop is back. I just absolutely loved it. Tell us, we've just got a little more time. So tell us a little bit about, you've been watching Bob Dylan as a kid. You heard stories from your dad. What was your dad's impression of Bob Dylan, seeing him over the years?
That's a good question. I've read in books, or people pointed out in books where he talks about my dad being like a kind of a soul brother from his youth that he's carried with him through the years. I would say that's pretty accurate. As far as their dynamic together, they're like two guys going fishing. It's a different Bob Dylan than he portrays.
Right.
Just a very gracious and very, he kind of reminded me of my dad. Just very, very similar people. They come from the same place. They heard rock and roll for the first time on country radio coming out of Fargo. That's right, Mama. They just have a lineage that they cut at an important time in music history where one went one way and one went the other way. And, but they're very similar people in a lot of ways in their moment when they were talking. Just a good old Midwest guys. And but my dad's respected him over the years, and he has many stories. And one of his, a matter of fact, one of the times I was with Bob Dylan, and I gave him a CD of my dad's, which my dad would never do.
Right.
And there was a song on there called "It's All the Same." It's a record from the '70s. And there's a line in there that's a tribute to Bob Dylan. And it was like a little bit of a what's going on in my dad's mind about Bob kind of thing. And
right.
I wanted to give it to him and tell him about it. And the song was called "It's All the Same." And the line is, "Hey, Mr. Gunn, I got your message." Gunn as in Gunnn. So it's now, it's pretty obvious the tribute. Hey, you write a song, I'll paint a picture of where we've been and where we belong. It's all the same.
Oh, man.
We're the same guys.
This is so sweet, Robbie. And you've got a great career yourself. I look forward to seeing you here soon. We're going to play a song written by Mr. Bob Dylan, performed by Mr. Robbie Vee, off what I believe was the Adobe session. It's called The Man and Me from Bob's record, New Morning. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so my dad passed away from Alzheimer's, and there was just he wasn't all that, he didn't have all dysfunction, towards the end there, but we were always very musical with him, and that was kind of his spot of finding joy in the whole mess.
Right.
And so we drove down to the bus down to Tucson. My dad has a little horse ranch there, and we in the garage, I think you can even see the wash machine in the YouTube video. Mm-hmm. we just would plug in and we'd play songs that he'd want to play, that he liked. And he's a big, huge fan of A Man and Me and Every Grain of Sand and Forever Young. He just loved particular songs, but that was one of the ones he loved, and we played. I think we played it one time through, and
wow.
It ended up on the record. Everybody
out there in the radio land, streaming land, check that out. Robbie, thank you so much for talking to me, and I really enjoyed these stories. And I had the pleasure of meeting your dad at a Bob Dylan symposium that my next guest, Colleen Sheehy, put together, and he was one of the sweetest men I had ever met.
Well, he loved your career. I mean, he really did. He would talk about you. He would praise you with your talent and everything. He really enjoyed you. But you know that, I think. I mean, I think you guys had some nice conversations.
Oh, we sure did. And yeah, you're just a gem, as you are. Robbie, have a great rest of your summer. Keep rocking. We've got Colleen Sheehy coming up next, and then Martin Keller. We are going to listen to the great Robbie Vee doing Bob Dylan's Man and Me. Thanks, Robbie.
All the best, Paul. Take care.
Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. We're talking about the great Bob Dylan show that just happened on July 6th down in Shakopee, Minnesota at the Mystic Lake Amphitheater. Our next guest to tell us about her recollections of the show, Miss Colleen Sheehy, is a retired arts leader and organizer of the symposium and book Highway 61 Revisited, Bob Dylan's Road from Minnesota to the World. She also was one of the coordinating curators at the Wiseman Art Museum of the Bob Dylan's American Journey, which I believe is in 2007. A good friend and a longtime Bob Dylan fan, Miss Colleen Sheehy. Colleen, how are you this morning?
Oh, I'm good, Paul. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm so excited to chat with you. We've got, of course, we had Robbie Vee on, you and Martin Keller, all people that saw the show down in Shakopee. What were your first impressions and second and third impressions of the show on July 6th?
Oh, Paul, it's really going to stay with me for a long time. I went to completely open mind. I hadn't seen Dylan live probably in about 10 years. And I just thought whatever he does is fine with me. No expectations. He doesn't need to prove anything. And it was just so magical. The actual entire concert, not only Dylan. It was like John Doe and Lucinda were his children.
Yeah, right.
Who were amplifying, other parts of his sensibility and his history with John Doe's, Americana, with his punk background thrown in, and even his doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow is something that Dylan would have done, an old classic from Judy Garland, who grew up right by him.
Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I just played there last week.
Yeah, and Lucinda was,
phenomenal.
Kind of fire of the whole concert, and she was the political one, outspoken. She kept saying, "This is another topical song," talking about the world gone wrong, and so I felt like they gave voice, and they were so superb. As songwriters, as players, their bands were completely hot, and then Dylan was, it was magical.
Yeah.
I felt like he was, like Robbie was talking, I felt like he was a jazz singer.
Yeah.
And his band was so superb. The sound at that amphitheater is so clear and
I've never heard sound.
Yeah.
It's what that might have been the best mixed sound mix of any show I've ever heard, and I've heard thousands of shows.
Yeah. The guitars were just
chiming,
clearly ringing, and they were. I felt like it was almost like a country swing groove that they were in, and then his vocals were just like floating over the music. Billie Holiday came to mind.
Yeah, Tony Bennett.
And, he's been telling us for a while that he's a jazz singer.
Right.
Triplicate and all the jazz Sinatra work that he's recorded over the past 10 years. So his voice is good. And then I just loved his mystery. You couldn't see anyone on stage.
Yeah.
Hardly all the lights on stage were focused on the curtain behind them.
Right.
Everyone was in the dark. You couldn't see any faces. You couldn't see people playing. And then he's in his, it looked like kind of a raincoat-like hoodie, white. It wasn't like a hoodie that's just terry cloth or something. And I thought, okay, he's finally become the Phantom that he's always wanted to be. It was like he was this anonymous song and dance man traveling around.
You are exactly right.
Who he was.
You are exactly right, Colleen Sheehy. I thought it was not quite masked, but anonymous. He walked on stage. I am, the other great, powerful Minnesotan, 4 years Bob's Jr., Will Steger, is in the middle of an 800-mile Arctic trek, a solo trip, and Dylan walked on stage, and I imagine, Steger wearing something that looks similar up there in the Arctic, and probably not quite as probably more insulated than Bob's. But I looked at it. I said, you know what? Bob's entering his Howard Hughes phase. He's got the long fingernails. He's he's wearing his disguise, and I'm totally there for it.
Oh, it's beautiful. And the other thing that struck me was. He was singing a lot about death. Mm-hmm. And so, he just turned 85.
Yeah.
But just listening, he has sung about that since his first album, See That My Grave Is Kept Clean.
Right.
When he's like 21.
Yeah, I know.
But Hearing all these songs, The Man in the Long Black Coat, Black Rider, trying to get to heaven before they close the door.
Yeah.
So even Crossing the Rubicon has some references to the Rubicon between the earthly life and the heavenly life. I don't know. I think he's contemplating his mortality and letting us know. And then even just doing It Ain't Me, Babe. To me, that song is more not about a lover, but about not going to be who you want me to be.
Right.
But you have my songs, and that's enough.
Well,
it was superb.
And and then the covers. He did a Charlie Rich song, and I believe he did that song. I can tell attributed to Bo Diddley, although Bo didn't write it. But there was times when he was just kind of laying back and playing that piano. We've got to talk a little bit about his piano playing too, as well. But you could have been in a smoky bar somewhere in Milwaukee, just listen to the guy in the corner play country western songs.
Yeah, I know, and I think that's what he wants to be, that anonymous player. Kind of like I was telling my friend that went with me, Peggy Korsmo-Kennan, who is a huge Dylan fan. It reminded me of Shadow Kingdom.
Right.
The film that came out during the pandemic, black and white, where he's just at some honky-tonk club playing for an audience, and he is sort of that somewhat anonymous performer.
Yeah.
But I know Peggy said that this concert was he was so much more present and into it than when she saw him in Iowa City just a couple of months ago. He was still on the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour. Right. Now he's on the end. But she didn't think he was that into the concert that night. Yeah, well, it was... I think he was truly engaged. Yes. I think it's actually, that he doesn't like to show it. Yeah. I think he's grooving to be in the Twin Cities. Yeah, he was among friends, and he came out and gave us, a little applause to us at the end. You could felt he was in his comfort zone. Now, Colleen, one more question for you. Yeah. You have, I imagine Colleen in high school was rocking a Bob Dylan and the Beatles way back when, but as an arts administrator, you put on that great show where I met, I might add, Robbie Vee, by the way, at the University of Minnesota, at the Weissman Art Museum, Bob Dylan's American Journey. Tell us from your perspective as an educator and as a fan where Bob Dylan fits in to American cultural history. Well, he's one of the great interpreters of American culture and history, values, politics, conundrums, paradoxes of this culture. And I think he, like Greil Marcus writing, he didn't write about Dylan, but he, oddly enough, in Mystery Train, his great book from the late 70s. But, Marcus, who has written a lot about Dylan, recognizes that music is like the mainstream of how American culture gets expressed. Mm-hmm. For these broad audiences, because it comes out of these experiences of, black musicians, the mountain musicians, the country western, the folk musicians, and then rock and roll just kind of lights a spark under all of it. Right. And then at the same time, of course, as we know, our dearly beloved teacher, B.J. Rolfson, who taught Dylan at Hibbing High. Dylan has also been able, in, totally genius way, to integrate poetry, on one hand to recognize the poetry in these forms of folk music, right, but also to integrate, Wordsworth and Keats and Allen Ginsberg and William Carlos Williams. And, he just has created this rich body that interprets American culture and history. And as we know, Paul, people are going to be listening to him and studying him way into the future. You know, he does get compared to Shakespeare, and I do think his body of work has that richness and that depth of humanity.
And
I was reading something recently about that Leonard Cohen said about him, that, you know, he's this great chronicler of the human heart. So it's not just that he's writing, you know, a chronicle of history, but he has this emotional depth that really makes songs powerful. So, you know, to start the concert with To Be Alone With You, you know, what a beautiful love song. But then it's like he's singing it to all of us.
Right.
So, yeah, no, he's, I don't know if I can say anything that hasn't been said about him as far as his significance.
Well, I have to introduce you to my friend, Professor Ann Margaret Daniel, because you are two brilliant women that know as much about American poetry, history, culture, and music, and Bob Dylan more than anybody. But this was great, Colleen. Great chatting with you.
Paul.
And we've got Marty Keller coming up. But really appreciate your insight, Colleen, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, me too. Take care.
There was a little boy, and there was a little girl, and they lived in an alley under the red sky. There was a little boy and there was a little girl, and they lived in an alley under the red sky. There was an old man, and he lived in the moon. One summer's day, he came passing by. There was an old man and he lived in the moon, and one day he came passing by. Someday, little girl, everything for you.
Welcome back to the last set of the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. Now we are going to be chatting with my old buddy, Martin Keller, about Bobby Dylan and his experience at the show on July 6th and more. Marty, how did you like the show?
Hey, Paul, good to be here. I like to call the new Mystic Lake joint the new Native American bandstand. I like, I like the show. I like the venue. Unfortunately have not been able to listen to your previous guests, so I'm maybe duplicating some of the things they said or noticed. But there were three key things for me. One, the continuous music. There wasn't really any space between songs. It was almost like a tape loop or a song cycle for all of the 15 or 16 tunes that Dylan and the band did. And I think the effect was pretty dreamy. It had an elevating effect that I think raised the show up a few notches. It was an interesting display of his music, and I've never seen that done before. Number two, the crowd demographics were really wide, which was refreshing. I saw a lot of young people there that I have never seen at Dylan shows. I mean, he can probably attribute it to the Timothy Chalamet effect from the Complete Unknown movie, whatever, but it was really, I think I saw almost as many young people under 30 as I did old folks over 50 and 60, and that was cool. Number 3, which I thought was, I think Bob's whole thing with his band now, especially with the new guy, what's his name, Jag?
Yeah, well, there's Julian Lodge, something like that, and Joel Patterson.
Julian Lodge, the jazz player. Now it looks like he may have added a third guitarist in the last 48 hours.
Leonard Skinner, Here We Come, the 3-guitar attack of Bobby Dylan.
But it seemed like they were going more for a whole jazz vibe the whole night, because the solos were pretty jazzy. The arrangements, most of them were pretty jazzy. So, maybe Bob is seriously toying with that whole Piano Man Lounge Act thing. That stage, which I don't think he's changed up much since he played Mankato a couple of years ago. The stage really looks like a lounge setting, like a 40s lounge or piano bar. Number 4, too damn many covers. Covers were good, but, and the one that I wanted to hear, he has yanked off the set list currently. Nervous Breakdown has a great Minnesota connection, obviously. Sure. Eddie Cochran grew up in Albert Lee. But that's gone, and I was hoping to hear that live, and also wondering if maybe that's Mr. Dylan's social commentary for the current period that we're in.
Right.
Number 5, way too much songs, again, from Rough and Rowdy Ways, which I think it's a good album. It's not a great album. But are songs like Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, or Crossing the Rubicon any better than Lovesick or What Was It You Wanted from previous albums? I mean, I have a list of stuff that he could readily substitute for these tunes. I don't know if he's still trying to sell that record, but I just think there's some, his catalog is so immense. He could cherry pick almost anything, and I think improve his 90 minutes on stage remarkably.
Well,
my final thought, and then you can jump in and throw some eggshells at me, but he's standing up there in his it's a static show. Nobody really moves around. You got to look hard to see who's up there. Even on the video camera screens, he's standing up there in his kind of new uniform, the up hoodie look, which is probably going to set fashion trends for the next 5 years if it hasn't already. He's up there like a mad alchemist, remixing up the medicine again.
Yeah.
And I think it's always interesting what he's going to do, how he's rearranged this or that. But, he's Bob Dylan. He can do what he likes.
Well, I probably only listened to Rough and Rowdy Ways 2 or 3 times, and there's a certain melodic sameness to that record. But I thought playing those songs, what was nice about those 2 guitar players who were, I can't say enough about. They remind me of the great legendary guitar duo from the 30s and 40s, Eddie Lang and Carl Kress, was they brought some more melodic information that they put on top of those songs that made those songs a little more relatable for me. But that being said, I'm not here to judge Bob Dylan's choice of songs like my Debbie Downer guest is Martin Keller right now. But I really appreciate your honesty, which you've always been. Now tell us about you're working on a book, and that had something to do with you spending some time interviewing Bob in. Where was the interview? When was the interview? And what is the book going to be about?
Well, over the last let's see. I started writing a Dylan memoir in 24. I turned the book in late in 25, and it was supposed to come out in May of this year, and then they pushed it to August. And then 3 months ago, they pushed it to early 2027. And the book is about my time with Dylan, but it's also has a long arc that encompasses not only his time here in Minnesota, which I think is probably more substantial than people know, but really his whole lifetime. And it's pretty expansive. It's called The Last Individualist. The title stems from a very almost casual, unnoticeable comment he made during the interview, which, by the way, was 4 hours long.
Wow. Which
is totally unheard of with Mr. Dylan or just about any rock star or singer-songwriter of his stature. It really turned into less of an interview and more of a very long conversation between two people with several of Bob's friends, including Larry Keegan, on the sideline, just making comments and observations here and then. The interview took place at Larry's house in St. Paul in Midway.
Sure.
Late June, early July of 1983, on the eve of the release of Infidels, which I think has been a highly overlooked record. Even though the interview was there, Dylan insisted that the dateline be New York City because Bob has, as you can probably imagine, like a lot of people at his level, has a lot of stalkers on his trail, as he described it. He called me one time prior to the long interview and at City Pages, and I had a column back then called Martian's Chronicles, and he goes, "Hey Marty, this is Bob. I got a lot of people on my trail," and he wanted me to write something in my gossip column, that he was in Minnesota, but now he's gone. So, I went back and find out what are the pros, what are the cons of doing this, but it was a gossip column, so I made up some bullshit and put it in the column the next week. I have no idea if it had any impact, but
Marty Keller.
Like
I said, Marty Keller, that might have been one of the worst Bob Dylan imitations I've ever heard. But keep going. We've just got a couple of minutes left.
All right. Well, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff like that, including Dylan wanting to meet Prince one time. I'm not going to say how that turned out. You can read it in the book when it comes out. The interview has quite a few, I think, revelations in it. He didn't want to talk about the gospel years, but we ended up doing so. Despite that was one of the ground rules. But, it was a fascinating time, at least for me, in my journalism career. And I think people are going to find a lot of new information and some fresh insights. There's a whole chapter about his lifelong friend, Larry Keegan, who spent most of his life in a wheelchair. There's also a whole chapter about Robbie Vee, who first hired Bobby Zimmerman, fresh out of his graduating class up in Hibbing, to play in his band The Shadows in Fargo. And, Bobby Vee has always, as Larry, has always gotten short shrift in most of the Dylan narratives that I have ever read. So, a lot of good stuff coming up, I think.
To be alone with you, just you and I, under the moon, beneath the star-spangled sky. I know you're alive, and I am too. My one desire is to be alone with you, to be alone with you, even for just an hour, in a castle high, in an ivory tower. Some people don't get it, they just don't have a clue.
Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show is produced by Paul Metsa, engineered by Brett Johnson. We would like to thank our guests, Robbie Vee, Colleen Sheehy, and Martin Keller. I've got a big show coming up at Moe's in Mounds View on August 22nd with the all-new Paul Metsa Group and the New Primitives, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Moe's in Mounds View. You can buy my records and books at the Electric Fetus of Minneapolis and follow me at paulmetsa.com. And like my dad used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy.